cold wind moved through the dark alley, shaking old newspapers and torn plastic bags. The sky was gray, the ground was wet, and garbage was everywhere. Dogs with thin bodies fought over a broken food box, their growls echoing in the narrow space. But in the corner, hidden behind a pile of trash, something moved. It wasn't trash, it was a girl, small, dirty, and trembling. Her skin was pale and strange, her eyes a soft, glowing blue. She was not human, not fully, but she didn't know that. She didn't know anything, not her name, not where she came from, not why she was lying among garbage. She sat up slowly, her hands shaking, and looked around like a frightened child. Her clothes were torn and wet. Her arms had bruises and thin cuts. A sharp pain hit her head, and she closed her eyes, trying to remember, but there was nothing. Only silence in her mind. No voice, no name. Just cold air and the sound of barking dogs. The dogs didn't bite her. They just sniffed her and lay beside her. One of them curled around her back to keep her warm. Another placed a broken piece of bread near her hand. She was too weak to move much, but her hands touched the bread. And she slowly brought it to her lips. It was dry and old, but it was something, and she was hungry. Very hungry. She looked around and saw tall buildings far above. People walked past the alley but never looked inside. She tried to speak, but her voice was dry and cracked. Her mouth opened, but no words came, only a sound like a whisper. Broken and weak. For 3 days, she stayed there, sleeping between garbage and dogs. At night, she cried softly, but the dogs stayed close, keeping her safe. Each time she heard footsteps, she hid behind boxes, scared of everyone. Once, a man looked into the alley, saw her glowing eyes, and ran away in fear. She didn't understand why she scared people. She didn't even know what she looked like. There was no mirror, only dirt, blood, and silence. Then, on the 4th day, something different happened. A man came, but he didn't look angry or afraid. He walked slowly, wearing an old jacket and boots. He stopped a few feet away and placed something on the ground. It was a sandwich, still warm, wrapped in paper. He didn't speak loudly. Just said in a soft voice, "If you're hungry, this is for you." Then he stepped back and sat on a wooden crate nearby. He didn't look at her directly, just watched. The sky, she didn't move. Not at first. She stared at the food, her stomach twisting, her body frozen with fear. Was it a trick? Would he hurt her? But the dogs didn't growl, they didn't bark, they just looked at the man quietly. After a few minutes, the man stood up and said, "I'll come again tomorrow," and then he walked away. She waited until the sun started to go down, then slowly crawled out and picked up the sandwich. The warmth of it made her hands shake harder. She ate it quickly, tearing it like an animal, tears running down her face. She didn't know why she was crying, but something inside her was breaking and healing at the same time. That night, she dreamed. Not a full dream, just broken pieces. A ship, fire, metal, screams, and a word whispered in her ear. "Run." She woke up gasping, her hands digging into the dirt. The dogs were there, calm, waiting, watching her like guardians. The next day, the man came again. He had brought a blanket, some water, and a scarf. He sat in the same spot and spoke again. "You don't have to come out," he said. "I just want you to be safe." Then he placed everything near the same spot and left again. She watched him from the shadows, her mind slowly waking up. He looked tired, maybe lonely too. Something about him felt familiar, not his face, but the way he moved, slow and gentle. He didn't ask questions, didn't push, just came, left food, and walked away. And each time he came, the whisper inside her grew louder. "Hope," it said, again and again. She didn't know the meaning of the word, but she liked how it felt, warm, soft. Not like the cold metal in her dreams, not like fear or hunger or pain, just something small and bright in the dark. The dogs seemed to understand before she did. They no longer circled her in protection when he came. Instead, they wagged their tails and sat beside him quietly. It was as if they trusted him. And now, she wanted to trust him too. But trust was something she had lost with her name, still. That night, she picked up the scarf he left and wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled like smoke and soap and winter wind. And for the first time since she woke up in the trash pile, she felt human. The man came every day. Always at the same time, he never came close. Never forced her to speak. He simply placed food, water, and something warm. Then sat quietly for a few minutes. His eyes were tired, like someone who had seen too much. Pain. He didn't smile much, but his voice was calm, soft, like a song with no melody. She still hid behind the old trash bin, wrapped in his scarf, her body weak, her thoughts slow. Her memories like broken glass, but she watched him, every movement, every breath. He looked poor too, with a torn coat, boots covered in mud, and a long scar on his right hand. He wasn't a rich man. But he gave her food every day, and he spoke to her like she mattered. "I used to sleep out here too," he said one day, placing a small bowl of soup on the ground. "No one saw me, not really, just another ghost in the city." His voice wasn't sad, just honest. He looked at the dogs and gave a small nod. "They helped me too, believe it or not." She listened, but said nothing. Her voice still didn't work right, and her fear sat deep inside her chest. But each time he came, her body hurt a little less. The cold didn't feel as sharp. The hunger wasn't as loud. The dogs trusted him, and now, maybe she could too. That night, she crawled out from the pile of trash after he left. She sat under a broken light, her hands holding the warm soup. It smelled of herbs and vegetables. And something else, safety. She sipped it slowly, careful. Not to spill a drop. The dogs sat around her, tails wagging, as if they knew something good had begun. The next day, the man came again. This time with something wrapped in cloth. He placed it gently on the ground and said, "These boots are a little old, but they'll keep your feet warm." He looked at the dogs and smiled. "You've got quite the team watching over you." Then he placed a small folded paper near the bowl. It had simple drawings, pictures of food, water, bed, and a question mark beside a girl. He was trying to speak with her in pictures. Her eyes widened. And she touched the paper slowly. Her finger moved to the drawing of the girl. Then she pointed at her chest, unsure. He nodded gently. "Yes, that's you. I was wondering your name." She looked down, lost, her lips moving but making no sound. She didn't know her name, not yet, but in that moment, she understood something important. He didn't want anything from her. He just wanted her to be okay. That night, under the stars, she spoke for the first time, not in English, not in Earth language, but in her own tongue, a soft, melodic word, almost like a sigh. One of the dogs perked up, tilted its head, and barked twice. She repeated the word again, slower, Lyra. It felt right, not perfect, but close. It wasn't a full memory, but it was a beginning. The man came the next day. And she did something she never did before. Just one step. He stopped, surprised, but still calm. She pointed at herself and whispered, "Lyra." He blinked and smiled. The first real smile she had ever seen. "Lyra," he said, repeating the name like a promise. "That's a good name." From then on, she listened more closely. She watched how he spoke, how he moved, how he treated the dogs. He talked to them like friends, scratched their ears, laughed when one tried to steal his sandwich. He once told a story about a time he had to share a single loaf of bread with 4 dogs in winter. They waited until I ate first, he said, like they knew I needed it more. Lyra didn't understand every word, but she understood the feeling. He was kind, broken like her, but still full of something warm, and slowly she felt a new feeling growing inside her chest. Trust. One day, the man brought a small device, old and dusty, he said. Found this in a junkyard. I think it's some kind of translator. He turned it on, and it blinked with blue light when she spoke. Softly, the device made strange noises, then said in a rough voice, "Lost, alone." Cold, her heart raised. Those were her feelings, and now someone could understand them. The man didn't speak, just placed his hand gently near her. Not touching, just offering. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. She looked at his hand, then at his eyes, and gave a tiny nod. For now, she didn't need to remember everything. She just needed to believe that not all humans were cruel. Some were like him, kind, patient, and willing to see someone others ignored. And so, the alley was no longer just a cold place filled with trash. It had become something else. A place where hope returned, one bowl, one word, and one human at a time. The morning was cold again, but Lyra felt something different inside her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't hunger, it wasn't pain. It was small, quiet, but real, something like light inside the dark. The man came as usual, his boots crunching softly on the broken ground. He held a metal thermos in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. He stopped at the edge of the alley, like always, but this time Lyra was already sitting near the center, beside her dogs. She didn't hide. Not today. Her scarf was still wrapped around her neck, and the old boots were on her feet. She looked at him with wide eyes that still glowed softly, like a forgotten star. He smiled gently and crouched down, placing the thermos and blanket on the ground. "Good morning, Lyra," he said, his voice soft. She didn't answer with words, but she nodded slowly, her hair falling over her face. The man opened the thermos and poured the soup into a small cup, steam rising into the chilly air. He held it out with one hand, his fingers trembling just a little from the cold. Lyra hesitated, her fingers curling and uncurling. The dogs watched closely. One growled softly, warning but not aggressive. She looked at the man's hand, the warmth in the cup, the soft breath in the cold air. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand shaking as it moved. She touched the cup, their fingers brushing. For just a moment, it felt like lightning and calm at the same time. Her body flinched at the touch, not in fear, but in surprise. His hand didn't grab her, didn't tighten, didn't hurt. It just stayed there, open, still, waiting. She took the cup with both hands and pulled it close, feeling its heat move through her chest. The man sat down a little farther, careful not to push her too much. He unrolled the blanket and placed it near her feet. "One step at a time," he whispered. "You're doing great." Lyra didn't know the words, but the tone was kind, and that was enough. She sipped the soup, her lips still trembling. But it was the first real warmth she had felt in days. Then something strange happened. One of the dogs growled again, but this time it wasn't at the man. It was at something shiny buried under the trash behind her. Lyra turned her head slowly, her heart suddenly racing. There, under a piece of broken wood and metal, was a strange object blinking with faint green light. She crawled toward it, her knees weak but steady. She reached into the pile and pulled out a cracked black device, smooth, alien, not of Earth. It was old and broken, but something in her body reacted to it. Her hand shook as she held it close, and her head started to pound again. Memories rushed in, images of stars, metal halls, pain, and running, always running. She dropped the device, gasping, her breath coming fast and sharp. The dogs barked in panic, forming a circle around her. The man stood up quickly, rushing to her side but not touching her. "You okay?" he asked, fear in his voice. She didn't answer, just pointed at the device, her lips whispering something in her own tongue. The man picked it up gently, looking at it with curious eyes. "It's not human," he said, examining the buttons and glowing lines. Lyra stared at it with wide, terrified eyes. She rocked back and forth, whispering the same word again and again, "Traineth. Traineth." The man didn't know what it meant, but he could see the fear in her face. He placed the device inside his coat and crouched beside her, speaking slowly. "It's okay. It's gone. I'll keep it safe." Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of tears she didn't understand. He took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders. His hands careful and slow. "You're safe," he said again, and this time she believed him, not just because of his words, but because of his touch. His touch was gentle, warm, never cruel, never fast. She leaned into the coat, holding it tight around herself like armor. And for the first time, she let out a small sound, a quiet sob that turned into a breath. The man sat beside her as the dogs calmed down, curling around their feet. He didn't ask more questions, didn't push her to talk. He just stayed, quiet, like the wind between two storms. Lyra looked up at the sky, cloudy but open. A soft memory floated in her mind, a lullaby in another language. A voice singing gently as stars blinked overhead. She closed her eyes and whispered the final word of the song. The man didn't understand it, but he felt the weight of it. It was a word of loss, of home, of something stolen, but also of hope. That night, Lyra didn't sleep curled in trash. She slept under a blanket, with dogs beside her and a coat wrapped around her like a promise. The first touch of warmth had reached her. Not just her skin, but her soul. And though her memories were broken, something inside her whispered she was not alone anymore. The sky over the city turned darker than usual. Heavy clouds rolled across the horizon like slow-moving beasts. Lyra stood at the edge of the alley, wrapped in the man's coat, staring at the sky. She didn't know why. But her heart beat faster when the clouds moved that way. Something inside her whispered, warning her that something was coming. The man arrived with food again, smiling like always. But today, she didn't smile back. Her eyes were wide, her body tense, and her ears twitched at every sound. The dogs barked more than usual, walking in circles, sniffing the air. Even they sensed something strange in the wind. He placed the food down, then looked at her face carefully. "You okay, Lyra?" he asked, kneeling slowly. "You look like you saw a ghost." She didn't answer with words, but she pointed up to the sky. Then she made a shape with her fingers, like a triangle with wings. He frowned and followed her gaze. But all he saw was clouds and fading light. That night, everything changed. Lyra was sitting with the dogs when a soft humming noise filled the air. It didn't come from the ground, but from above. She froze, her head snapping toward the rooftops. Her eyes glowed slightly brighter, and her breath caught in her throat. From behind the clouds, a dark shape slowly moved, silent, smooth, and fast. It wasn't an Earth ship. Didn't have lights, no noise, just pure shadow. A black drone hovered just above the alley, its eyes blinking red, scanning the ground. Lyra jumped to her feet, grabbed the blanket, and pulled the dogs toward the corner. She pressed her body against the wall, heart pounding like a drum. The man heard the barking and came running from the next street. He stopped when he saw the drone, a strange cold crawling up his spine without thinking. He picked up a broken pipe and threw it straight at the drone. The metal clanged against its side, making it spin slightly, then fly upward into the clouds. Again, gone but not forgotten, he rushed toward her, breath short, eyes wide. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Lyra, what was that thing?" She stared at the sky, tears in her eyes, then slowly whispered, "Hunter." The word made him freeze. Hunter, Not a drone, not a machine, but something worse, something sent. To find and capture. Later, when the night became quiet again, Lyra took a stick and began drawing in the dirt. She drew a map not of streets, but of stars. Then she drew ships, arrows, and one planet marked with a circle and a line through it. She pointed at the circle and whispered, "No, go back." He understood. This was her home. And someone didn't want her to return. She drew another symbol, a large red X, over her own face. His stomach turned cold. "They marked you for death." He asked quietly. She nodded, her fingers trembling. The device he had found near her, the alien tech, it had a signal. Maybe it had called them. Maybe it had led the hunters to her. He pulled the device from his coat, wrapped it in cloth, and smashed it with a brick. It sparked once, then went dark forever. Lyra flinched, but didn't stop him. That night, they moved deeper into the city. Away from the alley, he took her to an old train tunnel. Long forgotten, filled with dust and rats, but safe from the sky. There, under broken stone. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest. The man built a small fire with trash wood. Keeping it low, he made tea from wild herbs. Handed her a warm tin cup. She took it with both hands, her body still shaking. "I won't let them take you," he said softly. "Not while I'm breathing." Lyra looked up. Her eyes filled with fear and something else, trust. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time she touched him on purpose. Her fingers were cold, but the message was warm. She believed him. In the corner of the tunnel, the dogs laid close, growling in their sleep. Even in dreams, they felt the danger outside. The drone returned once more, circling the sky, but not finding them. It hovered for a while, then vanished into the clouds again. But they knew it would return, and next time, it might bring more. Still, inside the tunnel, the fire glowed softly, and the silence was calm. The man stared at her and whispered, "You're not just someone they're hunting, you're something important." Lyra nodded slowly, then touched her chest and said, "Key," one word, and everything changed again. He didn't fully understand what she meant. But if she was the key, then maybe the hunters weren't just after her. Maybe they feared what she could unlock, a memory, a secret, a truth that could change everything. The shadows had returned, silent and sharp. But now, she wasn't alone, and this time, she had someone willing to fight with her. Not because she was alien, not because she was special, but because she was Lyra, and she was no longer forgotten. The train tunnel was dark, cold, and full of dust. But for Lyra, it was safer than the open sky. She stayed close to the old wall. Her knees tucked under her chin. The fire the man had built had gone out hours ago, but its warmth still lingered in the air. She listened to the silence around her, broken only by the soft breathing of the dogs beside her. The man had gone out early. Quietly, before sunrise, he promised he would return soon, whispered that he needed to find medicine. Lyra had nodded. Though fear gripped her chest again, being alone still scared her, even with the dogs around. She held tightly to the scarf he had given her, rubbing the soft fabric between her fingers like a charm. As she waited, her thoughts drifted. She touched the ground, drew little shapes with her finger circles, stars, and her name. She had learned to spell it the human way. "Lyra," she whispered to herself, her voice shaking slightly. Every time she said it, her heart felt just a little stronger. The dogs stood suddenly, ears up, noses sniffing the air. She tensed, clutching the scarf, her eyes locked on the tunnel entrance. But it wasn't danger, not yet. It was the man, finally returning, his coat dusty, arms full of supplies. He smiled. As he stepped into the light, "Miss me?" He joked gently. She didn't smile, but she moved closer, and that was enough. He sat down and opened the small bag, pulling out cans, bandages, and a bottle of water. "Got this from an old shelter. he said. Place was falling apart, but some things were still good. He handed her a protein bar and some dried fruit. She took them, careful not to drop anything, her fingers still slow but getting stronger. Later that day, he patched up a deep cut on her leg. She winced, but didn't pull away. "You're healing well," he said, looking at her with gentle eyes. "You've been through so much, but you're still standing." Lyra looked down and touched her leg softly, then whispered, "Because you helped." The tunnel became their quiet home. The walls were broken in places, and the ground was uneven, but the silence was safe. The kind of silence that hugged instead of hurting. The man used cardboard and broken wood to make a small corner space for her. He called it your room, and though it was small, Lyra smiled when she saw it. She used old cloth and blankets to make it soft. The dogs slept near the entrance like guards standing watch at night. She would sit with the man and listen as he told her about the stars. He didn't know everything, but he tried. He spoke of constellations, moons, and human myths. Lyra listened with wide eyes, sometimes nodding, sometimes whispering a word in her own language. One night, after a quiet dinner, she pointed to the stars drawn on the wall and said, "My sky." He looked at her, surprised. "That's where you're from?" She nodded slowly, then closed her eyes and placed her hand on her chest. "My family." "Gone?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes again. He didn't ask more questions, just moved closer and sat beside her without saying a word. That moment didn't need words. The silence between them was enough. It said, "I'm here, you're safe, you're not alone." He gently passed her an old book, its pages yellow and torn. It had pictures of planets, starships, and old space maps. Her fingers traced the drawings, and for a moment her face softened with curiosity instead of fear. Days passed quietly, and Lyra began to help more. She shared her food with the dogs, arranged the supplies, even tried learning to write more human words. The man found old notebooks and a pencil, and each morning she practiced writing one new word: warm, light, safe. He smiled at her progress, always encouraging her with nods and gentle words. But outside, the world was changing again. Rumors spread in the city of Strange. Visitors asking questions, people in dark uniforms, tall and silent, showing blurry photos and scanning devices. The man heard whispers at an old food line. They're looking for something. Or someone. His heart tightened, and he returned to the tunnel faster than ever before. That evening, he spoke to Lyra in a serious voice. "We might have to move again," he said. "They're getting close." She didn't cry, didn't panic. She simply nodded and started packing their small supplies. The silence of the shelter had taught her something. Not all safety lasts forever, but trust. Trust can follow anywhere. Before they left, she took a small rock and scratched her name into the tunnel wall. Not for others to see, but for herself. To say, "I was here." To remind herself that even in the darkest place, she had found peace. Even for a short time. And as they stepped out of the tunnel, her hand slipped into his. She squeezed gently, her first time holding his hand. He looked down, surprised, then smiled, and together, with the dogs behind them, they walked into the sick unknown. Still afraid, but not alone. They walked for hours. Through narrow streets and broken buildings, the wind carried dust and whispers. But Lyra didn't let go of the man's hand. The dogs followed closely, moving like shadows in the corners. The city seemed quieter than before, like it was holding its breath. The man finally stopped in front of a half-burned building, its roof cracked and walls blackened with smoke. "This used to be a lab," he said softly, pushing open the door. "No one comes here now." Too many stories of ghosts and fire. Lyra stepped inside, her eyes scanning the dark hallways. Old machines lay broken on the floor, glass panels shattered, wires hanging from the ceiling. But the walls still held symbols, strange glowing letters she could almost understand. They made their way to a small room at the back. There was a mirror on the wall, cracked but still standing. Beside it sat a strange device, half covered in ash. It was round, silver, and hummed softly when the man touched it. "I found this once," he said. "Didn't know what it did." Until now, Lyra moved slowly toward it, her breath growing heavier. Her fingers touched the device, and it lit up in bright blue. A soft pulse ran through her arm. Not painful, just warm. The mirror shimmered. And for a moment, her reflection changed. She saw herself not covered in dirt, not weak, but wearing silver robes. A crown on her head and light in her eyes. She gasped, stepping back, the dogs growling low. The man stared at the mirror too, his eyes wide. "That's you," he whispered. "Lyra, you're royalty." She didn't speak, her mouth slightly open, her heart pounding. Memories came crashing back. Bright rooms, servants, screams, needles running down metal halls. And betrayal, tears filled her eyes, and she shook her head slowly. "No more. Princess," she whispered, "they took everything." The man stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "They tried to erase you," he said, "but you're still here. You survived, Lyra. That means something." The device made another soft sound and displayed symbols in the air. The man looked at them, confused, but Lyra began to read slowly. Subject: Lyra Lyen 217. Status: escaped, memory loss, 82%. Threat level: critical. Her breath caught as she read the last line. Asset must be destroyed. If located, she closed her eyes and whispered, "They want me dead. Not because I'm weak, but because I know the truth." The man sat beside her, running a hand through his messy hair. "So you were important," he said, like a key to something big. She nodded, her voice shaky. "They used children. For power, many died. I ran." Her fingers curled into fists. "They want silence." I remember now. He looked at her with quiet strength in his eyes. "Well," he said, "then we won't let them silence you. You're not alone." "Anymore," she looked at him, her eyes full of tears and fire at the same time. "You're not scared?" she asked in broken English. "Even if they come again?" "I'm always scared," he replied with a gentle smile, "but I choose who I stand beside." "And I choose you." The fire inside her chest burned brighter. For so long, she had been running, hiding, forgetting. Now, for the first time, she was remembering and standing still. That night, they stayed in the lab, hidden in the lower level. Lyra practiced words in human language, and he told her old stories from Earth. He gave her paper, and she drew the symbol of her family, a circle of stars, broken in one place. Then she drew a new symbol beside it, a circle of stars with a human hand holding the broken edge. He looked at the drawing and whispered, "That's hope." The dogs curled around them as the fire crackled softly. Lyra held the mirror shard in her hands and stared at her reflection. She saw the girl who had crawled out of the trash pile, and now she saw the girl who had a name, a voice, and someone beside her. Not just a runaway, not just a ghost, but a survivor. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that someone dangerous was waking up. Not dangerous because she wanted to hurt, but because she remembered what they tried. To erase the hunters would come. She knew that, but this time she wouldn't run, not alone. Not anymore. And as the stars returned to the sky, Lyra whispered to the night, "I will speak." And the mirror shimmered back, "Yes, you will." The wind outside the broken lab howled like a voice from the stars. Lyra stood near the window, her reflection now clear in the dusty glass. No longer shaking, no longer hiding. She held the small mirror piece in her hand like a memory she refused to lose. Behind her, the man prepared supplies, canned food, cloth bandages, water bottles, old maps. He moved quickly, but calmly, as if he'd done this many times before. The dogs paced near the exit, growling low, their noses twitching at every sound. They could feel it too, the danger was close now. Lyra didn't flinch. She looked up at the gray sky and said softly, "They're here." The man stepped beside her, tightening the straps of his old backpack. "Then we stay ahead of them," he replied, "together, but before they could leave." The silence outside cracked like ice. A loud humming sound filled the air. Low and sharp, the dogs barked wildly, and the lights in the lab flickered and went dark through the roof's broken hole. 3 black drones dropped, slow and silent, their red lights blinking like cold eyes. Lyra stepped forward, her heart beating hard but steady, her hand glowing faintly with light she had forgotten she had. The man stood beside her, holding a metal pipe like a sword. The dogs spread out, ready to protect, ready to fight. The lead drone spoke in a cold voice. Not human, not kind. Target identified, Lyra -217. Order, terminate. The man growled under his breath. Not today. Lyra raised her hand, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then her palm glowed brighter, and a wave of energy pulsed through the air. The first drone jerked back, its lights flashing, sparks flying from its body. The dogs jumped at the second one, biting wires, pulling it down with furious growls. The third one tried to fire, but the man slammed his pipe against its side, knocking it into the wall. Smoke filled the lab, and metal parts clattered to the floor. Lyra fell to her knees, breathing hard. The light in her hand fading, the man rushed to her side, holding her up. "You did it," he whispered. "You remembered." She nodded slowly, but tears rolled down her cheeks. "More will come, I know," he said, helping her stand. "That's why we have to go." They ran through the back door, the dogs following close. The city was still asleep, but the air had changed. Lyra could feel eyes in the sky, machines searching, scanning, waiting, but she didn't feel small anymore. They reached the edge of the industrial zone, where broken ships were left to rot. Among them stood one small vessel, half buried under metal scraps and vines. The man pulled away the debris, revealing the control panel. "It's old," he said, "but if your memory's back, maybe you can fly it." She placed her hand on the screen, and it lit up with her symbol, a circle of stars. Whole again, inside the ship, everything hummed with power. Lyra sat in the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing over glowing controls. The man strapped in beside her, while the dogs lay near their feet. "Where do we go now?" he asked, his voice calm. Lyra looked ahead, eyes filled with light. Not where, but why. She turned to him and whispered, "I carry a key. Not to a door, but to truth. They hid it inside me, locked it away, and threw me out like trash, but I remember now." He looked at her with deep pride. "Then let's show them what the trash can become." The ship lifted off slowly, its engines shaking the ground. Outside, black ships appeared, closing in fast, red lights blinking like sirens. A voice shouted from the radio, "Power down and surrender the asset." Lyra didn't answer. She looked at the man, then at the stars, and she pushed the lever forward. The ship shot into the sky, breaking through the clouds like fire through ice. Enemy ships followed, lasers cutting through the night. But Lyra was faster, smarter. No longer broken, the stars above seemed to sing as her ship danced through the chaos. A girl once forgotten, now leading a storm. When they finally escaped the planet's pull, Lyra stared out the window. The stars were quiet. Waiting for her return, she placed a hand on the mirror shard one last time, then let it go. It floated weightless in the ship, spinning slowly. She had no need to look back now. The man sat beside her, smiling tiredly. "Where to, Your Highness?" He asked jokingly. She chuckled softly. Home. Or what's left of it. And then? He asked, and then, she said, looking forward, we help others like me. The dogs curled up and slept peacefully. The ship moved into open space, carrying not just two souls, but a story that refused to stay buried. A girl who lived. In trash, a man who listened, and a hope that burned brighter than any hunter's weapon.